To my talk. I just want to say first, thanks so much for the WebZero team. They're awesome. This space is awesome. I lived in Berlin for 2 years, and Berlin in the summer is such a temptress. Like, it is just so beautiful outside. It's so warm, so nice. It's so great to be here. The winter sucks, but this is a good time to be here. This presentation, truthfully, is not as tuned as some of my other presentations. It is very much a lot of the current ideas in progress. And so the biggest thing I kind of want to talk about is how much the thinking about the space we're building in has changed and kind of come back to where we started. If you remember back in the Ethereum days, the original idea was the world computer. But somehow we got into this world of blockchains and DeFi and decentralized ledger, or distributed ledgers and all that kind of stuff. And finally, with this innovation of Jam, we're kind of coming back to the idea of this computer. We're kind of realizing that technology can actually lead us back to the vision we were going to originally. So this presentation is pretty much trying to redescribe that world computer, have you rethink about the technologies we're working with. Anyway, I would very much appreciate if you guys have any questions or comments along the way. Just raise your hand. Let's talk. Let's make this a conversation. Let's not make this I'm just spieling to you. But yeah, I would say a lot of the ideas are rough. Maybe I get some things wrong, and I would really love to be corrected if you think that something here is not right. So yeah, like I said, I kind of want to reframe everything we think about when we're building here, right? I think everyone in this space is, associated with the blockchain space, right? But I really think that with the new technologies, with what is actually capable and possible with the things that we're actually developing, we can really rethink about everything we're doing here. So I want to, again, reevaluate the ideas of Web3, the world computer, components of the world computer, the Web3 internet, what that might even look like, and products for the world computer. So let's start with Web3. Well, what is Web3? I think it's pretty hard, and it's really important to always start with this. Web3 is the mission we're all trying to deliver, right? And it really helps us identify what products are actually useful, what products are just memes or just taking advantage of the hype in the space around us, right? I think it's kind of hard to describe Web3 in a single punchy line. I mean, the phrase I was using a lot was less trust, more truth. One, I think, kind of maybe resonates with someone who doesn't really, understand exactly the space we're working in, a more equitable version of the internet. Gav recently described Web3 as a resilient public digital infrastructure. But I think that all of these single punchy lines doesn't really describe the problem we're trying to solve. I think the best way is to actually look at the problems themselves and realize, okay, what are we actually trying to do? So I have a simple set of conjectures here. Central authorities will always eventually abuse their powers. With increasing globalization caused by technology, the reach of those central authorities is greater than ever, right? Computers play a critical role in providing public digital infrastructure. We could create a world more resilient from these powers if the world's public digital infrastructure were itself more decentralized and resilient, right? And Web3 ultimately describes that resilient public digital infrastructure. This is what Gav was going towards. He calls Web3 the resilient public digital infrastructure of the world. And so I have this slide that I show in my recent presentations, kind of describes some of the historical events in the past that show why central authorities have corrupted and have used their powers against us. Again, financial crisis, we bailed out the banks. WikiLeaks censorship, we basically stopped organizations from spreading real information so they can control the narratives, right? Stopped them from having finance, etc. And Snowden revelations showed us that people were spying on us, taking our data all across the world. I asked an LLM, give me 10 historical events that show this, and they even have even more evidence. I'm sure if you ask for 100, you could get 100. If you go back into the history 1,000 years, if you go forward 1,000 years, if you could read the future, you would see over and over why central authorities abuse this power. And even everyday things, you have here a social media feed, which is controlled by some algorithm, right, showing you the latest news about either Israel or Palestine or Ukraine or Russia, right? Who knows what's going on behind these scenes, right? So these are, a combination of central authorities influencing, deciding what you see, what you do every single day. The real definition of Web3 is realization of the problems, right? And properties or tools do we need to solve those problems, right? And so Web3 is a combination of tools and technologies which are decentralized, which are verifiable, independently verifiable, right? Self-sovereign, interoperable, privacy-preserving, open, public, borderless, neutral, censorship-resistant, resilient, general, performant, coherent, and accessible. When we talk about what exactly Web3 is trying to deliver, it is trying to deliver a solution to the problems. And even this list is probably not a full list of all the possible things we need. This is just trying to describe things or properties we could have to try to solve these problems of central authorities, right? Okay, cool. So that's Web3 in a nutshell. Let's go into the origins of the world computer. So what is the world computer? So the world computer is this idea of a single, globally accessible, trustless computing platform that isn't owned or controlled by any single entity, right? This computer is formed by a decentralized network of participants who, agree on the state of the computer and applications and programs on that computer run exactly as they were written. You can prove that, I've written this contract a certain way or an application a certain way, and it will execute that way, right? It provably so, right? And really, this world computer is the backbone of this resilient public digital infrastructure that we imagine with Web3. Now, the origins of the Web3 computer is coming from the same space as Web3 itself. I mean, one of the reasons why I joined Parity and I'm in the Polkadot space is because of Dr. Gavin Wood. Like, he really is, extremely inspiring. And if you look at the work that he's been doing back with Ethereum, with Polkadot, and even now with Jam, it's been the same story ever since. He wrote almost 10 years ago this blog post on what Web 3.0 looks like. And you can see here, these are videos, it's a little blurry, but 9 years ago, Ethereum describing itself as the world computer. Gav presenting Ethereum to the world on the first, DevCon as the world computer, right? That was the original vision. But is Ethereum really a good measure of the world computer, at least Ethereum today? Well, I think Ethereum kind of claimed to be a computer because it was Turing complete. And I think that was fair at the time. But I think the reality of our current understanding with the technologies we have today, that's not really a good measure of what a real computer is, right? Turing completeness is a poor test of being a useful computer, right? There are lots of things that are Turing complete. Microsoft Excel is Turing complete. A game that I love to play, Magic the Gathering, is Turing complete. Magic the Gathering is not a computer, right? It is not a good, useful computer. Microsoft Excel, you would not build applications inside of Excel. These things don't make a lot of sense, right? So in a lot of ways, a lot of blockchains have achieved Turing completeness. They've added a smart contract platform, but they aren't really a good representation of a computer, what a computer should look like, how it should behave, right? So what are they? Most of these blockchains are distributed ledger technologies, right? And I'm sure you heard this term before. This term is actually kind of like when I was joining blockchain, it was like the business term. Oh, these are distributed ledger technology stuff. But that's actually what it is. They are the Web3 version of a spreadsheet. Right? Their job is to basically maintain and track data, have small kinds of computation, like, you can have these Excel formulas, whatever, that can convert the data or change it over time. But ultimately, it's just trying to create this ledger, this kind of history of storage and data that is decentralized. But again, you could build applications inside of Excel. I mean, people have built games and stuff inside of Excel as a test. But it doesn't really feel very good, right? Like, building apps for Excel is as painful kind of as building apps for blockchain today, right? Like, it feels weird. It feels awkward. You have to build a whole new set of applications with this constraint of the blockchain environment. And that's because, again, blockchains haven't achieved being a computer. They've achieved being a distributed ledger, right? So this is kind of one of the big kind of like aha moments. So I kind of want to, one of the really key points I want you to take away from this conversation is how we should look at the future of blockchains, especially starting now. I think that we can identify two different products using blockchain technology. A set of people building distributed ledger technology. Their primary purpose is to store data, right? And use the blockchain state. This is very much the backbone of decentralized finance. Like, ledger technology was how finance was done forever, right? You had a book, that was the ledger. We have electronic ledgers, and now we have decentralized ledgers. So it is all about finance, right? And this is a proven product. This thing has clear market demand. We see it all over. That it is no doubt that DLT technology is super good. But there is a new set of technologies. Jam is very much at the forefront of that, which is trying to use the same blockchain technology plus a lot of other Web3 technologies to build decentralized computers, right? And the difference here is that the primary purpose of the decentralized computer is not to store data, but it's to execute computation, right? It is to, the primary part of this is to create decentralized computation bandwidth, right? And this is the backbone of not finance, but of the new decentralized internet, right? It is a speculative product. It is there's no guarantee that the decentralized computer is actually useful. That's the unfortunate fact. It is a very speculative product. And market demand hasn't necessarily shown that people want that today. But it is based on a future that we need. It is not a need of the market, but a need of us as humans, as a society. We need a better world, this Web3 world, right? And so we can now start to see why some blockchains seem so different, right? Blockchains, if we look at that coin market cap list, you look at them across, some of them feel very different, feel very weird, right? If you start looking as, is this a distributed ledger or is this a decentralized computer, you can already start to see kind of the differences in the direction people are building in. Okay, am I everyone following so far? Is this feeling okay? Okay, cool. So let's talk about the components of the world computer, right? Well, the first thing I want to mention is one of the hard things to kind of wrap your head is that we're talking about a computer. This computer is virtual. This computer does not actually exist in the real world. There are computers in the real world, but they come together to create this virtual world computer, right? They're not actually a single physical machine, right? And so when you build an application, this application shouldn't know that it's not on a real computer. It should just think it's working on a real computer. But the application, when it actually runs, the actual process of running the application is much more kind of complex, right? I mean, it's a big technology, right? And so, when we talk about, again, running an application, we're passing it to some kind of Web3 cloud or Web3 server or Web3 computer. We're actually breaking it down and distributing it across many nodes all around the world, right? But again, the application shouldn't know that, right? That would be the optimal situation. And again, all of this is glued together with a consensus algorithm. The kind of the magical sauce that was kind of generated with Bitcoin was the solving of this Byzantine fault tolerance problem, right? And so by having a system where we can actually have many computers agree on stuff, they can act as a single unit and appear as a single computer to these Web3 applications. So if we then if we look from the application level, not at a bunch of blockchains and a distributed network, but as a computer, what can we say are the components of that computer, right? Well, we can say, like a normal computer. A computer has a hard drive. A decentralized computer will have a decentralized hard drive, right? This is introduced by a Merkleized blockchain state. It will have a processor, right? We know about in our history of computers, single core processors that are threaded, and multi-core processors, right? This is the kind of thing. So with Polkadot or with Ethereum, they made a single core processor, right? A single pipeline of state transitions that you execute one after the other. Let's say things like Solana, they created a threaded processor, right? So you actually still have a single state machine, but they allow some kind of parallelization if you can prove that the data across two transactions are totally independent, right? You can do that. Things like Polkadot actually created a multi-core processor where we had multiple state transitions happening at once across different cores, execution and sharding, and this was actually totally different, right? And then of course a computer can also have memory, right? And this is something that's quite new. So a lot of the old computers, the ledgers, didn't have this idea of memory. They just had a CPU and they had a hard drive. But we know a computer uses memory all the time, this kind of non-persistent storage, right? So this was kind of natively introduced by Polkadot with our PVF and data availability. So if you don't know, when we do parachain stuff, we need to store the data in a data availability layer. But the thing is that wasn't really generally accessible. It wasn't really generally used. In things like, more recently with Celestia, they're creating these kind of like, data availability as a secondary service, right? Like a non-persistent storage off the main network. But this is kind of weird. Like imagine you have a computer and your RAM is connected by a cable. How slow that would be. Literally how slow it is to use Celestia compared to a native DA layer. And then things like Jam are actually trying to introduce native DA layers, native memory that you have direct access to use, right? However you want to use it. So again, if you start looking at the blockchain, these components, they're not, you really start getting the idea of a computer, right? And then there's also entirely new components. There are things inside of this computer that we cannot compare to the physical one, right? So we have consensus layers, right, that achieve the consensus, economic layers, and these economic layers are used to allow the computer to influence the physical world, right? And then, of course, on-chain governance. This allows the physical world to influence the computer, right, back and forth. And these things don't really have a parallel in the real world because a normal computer is kind of owned by a single person. But these things are owned by many people distributed across the world, right? So these additional layers kind of make the computer work, make it function, is the glue that brings it together. And of course, I think if we can follow this pathway, we can start to imagine what the world of decentralized computers might look like, how it might grow. So one of the key parts of computers nowadays are GPUs, right? GPUs are really good at doing parallel, simple operations. We don't quite have a blockchain that kind of exposes that piece yet, or not that one that I know of, right? But I very much imagine that you could, if you think about blockchain as a decentralized computer or the kinds of technology you want to build, very much we would start to expose these kinds of decentralized GPUs for handling these highly parallel small tasks, small operations. We know they're extremely useful in computation, right? You have privacy solutions, things that we haven't quite touched on yet because they aren't very profitable, I think. Like things like mixed nets and ZK privacy layers. You want to add these things. I think right now blockchains have transparency by default, but this transparency is kind of a cop-out. Transparency is an easy way to verify that you and me are doing the same thing. But what we actually want to achieve is privacy with verifiability, right? And then of course you have the, if you have, imagine this as a single, a system as a single decentralized computer. The internet connects many decentralized computers. This is what trustless bridges are, right? And this is something that we're still working on. We're still trying to make better. And then eventually, you don't want to have just a single computer, but you want to have like a data center, some kind of much more large-scale kind of version of a decentralized computer. This is very much what we imagine with like the grid. The grid is kind of like some, many jam computers put together, working together, providing a much higher throughput. And there's probably many more ideas. I'm sure, if you talk to me after this, we can think about a million ideas of what's in my computer and what we could represent in a decentralized way, right? This is a really important slide. I think this is something that really, when people talk about, okay, well, decentralized computer is very speculative, it's very hypothetical. Is this actually appealing? Like, who does it appeal to? Are people asking for a decentralized computer? I think when I show you all those properties of Web3, some of them resonate with some people, some of them don't, right? And I think the way to look at the decentralized computer is actually as different kinds of computers. The decentralized computer, or the world computer, is a distributed computer, right? It is a computer where it has natural fallback. It can provide incredible uptime and guarantees. This is a very powerful property. It is a verifiable computer, right? One where people don't need to require trust in the platform or trust in the user they interact with, right? It is a resilient computer. It's one where applications and services need not worry about the restrictions and laws of the country they're operating in, the nation, and they can launch unstoppable applications. I'm not claiming that you have to have all of these things appeal to you to want to use this computer. Any one of these things is enough reason for you to want to put your application or put your service on this computer, right? So these are kind of ways you can think about, okay, well, if I'm targeting a certain business, I don't want to tell them, hey, this is the place where everyone can, post crazy memes or crazy, lies and no one can censor it. That's not the appeal. Maybe the appeal to them is that it's resilient or that it's distributed and it has natural fallback, right? These are the kinds of things when you target enterprise or you target certain audiences, you can describe to them the computer that they want to hear, right? But the thing is, the world computer is all of these things. It has all of these properties, right? Now, the costs. The world computer is not going to replace your personal computer. It's not going to replace most computers. It is a totally new type of machine, and it solves a different class of problems. And it comes with a bunch of other costs, right? So, as we know, the world computer is very much inherently slower and more expensive to use because you're running the same kind of applications across many machines, right? It is just slower. It is just literally more expensive. It is a finite public resource. So, because it's the world computer, everyone can use it. But that also means that if it has limited bandwidth, which of course it does, right, that only so many people can use it at so much scale, right? You might be blocked from using it in all the ways you want, right? Now, ideally, we hope to scale to a point where everyone has some amount of access, like a public good. But if you want more access, of course, you have to pay fees, right? And this can be limiting. It is permanent and immutable by design. So one of the effects of building a blockchain or using blockchain technology as the backbone of the decentralized computer is that you have this immutable history, right? So all of the kind of errors or actions of the past will be reflected there. And that might always be attractive to everyone, right? And of course, a big part of the computers, of the world computer is that it shifts burden onto the user, right? There is no forgot password link. There is no support hotline. This computer is kind of unforgiving in some ways, very raw. But in many ways, that is what allows it to be uncensorable, to be resilient, to be not in control of any party, right? You have full sovereignty. And that might be nice or not. So if we look at the Polkadot world computer, what that might look like, we have a decentralized CPU. That could be the Poka VM, the thing you might be hearing about a lot recently. This is RISC-V, right? And of course, this CPU is multi-core with execution sharding, right? The technology we've designed with Polkadot. It can have a decentralized permanent storage, right? That could be ParityDB or NOMT. NOMT is this project that Rob Habermeyer is working on to make a really fast, Merkleized blockchain state, really fast to access. It can have decentralized memory with our distributed decentralized data lake. It can have a kernel for that computer, which is JAM. JAM is very much the kernel, the thing that actually makes the computer work and run. It has an operating system. That's what Core VM is. Core VM is this Docker container that allows you to run regular applications on top of this computer stack. And of course, it has consensus, kind of gluing it all together, which is ELVs, our belief that a cynical rollup, not from ZK, but some kind of economic rollup can actually provide scalability for this computer. This is actually what the specs of our world computer. If you go to a store, you want to see which world computer you want to use, this is the thing that they'll try to sell to you. This is the pieces of that computer. Okay, so then let's start to say what does Web3 look like? By the way, should I stop? Anyone, any comments? No, just keep going? Okay, keep going, let's go. Web3, so what does Web3 look like? Oh yeah, yeah please.
Like one work computer sounds very centralized again. So maybe I'm just totally wrong here, but isn't it it should be more like a neural network, that it should be a lot of instances?
Yeah.
And that you have specialized instances instead of having, but I mean, as I said, I might be totally wrong. And
yeah. I think it's all about perspective. So one thing I mentioned here is that I do believe there will be an idea of the internet, right? So I don't believe there's going to be one world computer. I think there's going to be many world computers. And I think that these different blockchain teams are going to have...
I understand that it's more for a network of a lot of instances, and then you have specialized instances for different things.
I think neural network is kind of a heavy term, but it's like the internet, and you'll have different computers, and the different computers will have different specifications. For example, not everyone's going to use PokeVM. Someone's going to use SVM, they're going to use EVM, they're going to have different trade-offs of what CPU they're going to use, right? Not everyone's going to use NOT, not everyone's going to use JAM or Core VM. But there should be a way to connect these different computers together with the internet using trustless bridges, right? And I think that these different computers will have different trade-offs. For example, we have the belief that elves is the best way to scale computers. But there's a whole other thing, which could be totally right, that ZK rollups are actually the solution, right? And so there could be ZK rollup-based computers talking to our elves-based computers, and the benefits or trade-offs of these systems will be different, right? And we go actually really deep into how does a ZK rollup work? It requires these these heavy-powered sequencers, right, and stuff like that, which could lead to more centralization at that point. What's the problem with elves? Well, elves has more economic games and has some kind of not perfect finality, right? It's not instant finality. That might be a different situation. So depending on what trade-offs you need or what kind of things you're looking for, you might use a different computer, right? But I do think for example, within the idea of one computer, you do want centralization. You want to work in a single state machine. My application is useful because I'm running in a world with all the other applications. Fragmentation actually leads to kind of a uselessness of the applications themselves. If they're fragmented, they don't really work very well. But of course, what we know is this computer, even though it's a single state machine, it's run and verified by many underlying computers. So it's never really centralized. It's never really controlled by a single entity. But but any one computer will have a very big opinion on how the computer is run. Okay, great. Okay, so what does Web3 look like? Is Web3 an evolution or a revolution? And I think it's both. I think Web3 will be a technological evolution, right? We should not expect to rebuild or replace the majority of Web2. The Web2 internet works, and it works well. We should only fix what's broken. But it is a social revolution. I think we will see major shifts in how we expect people to interact with each other, people to interact with the physical world, the digital world, right? A shift in power, social structures, global access, etc. Right? So I don't think actually technologically speaking we're going to see huge changes because of Web3, but I hope that we'll see big impact in the social world. Web3 does not replace Web2, right? Again, most of the internet will likely run Web2 systems. It is cost efficient, it's scalable, it has more corporate control. It totally makes sense, right? But there are things that in the internet that Web3 systems can make better, right? And so let's look at some of those things. So what ways do Web2 want Web3? And I'm kind of here Web2 companies, right? Companies often don't want to be responsible for personal identifiable information, right? Actually, a huge number of companies, they love to offload their stuff to single sign-on or federated identity management. They don't want to control, they don't want to own your data. They want to take your money, but they don't want to have to be responsible for your login, for your password, for some kind of corruption. That's why things like Google, single sign-on, etc., Microsoft single sign-on, they're all working really well, right? Companies want to maximize profits, often by reducing middlemen. And we know that blockchain technology and decentralized finance can absolutely do that. They can reduce middlemen for payments, for subscriptions, for secondary sales, etc. Companies want deeper integration with their customers, right? And so DAOs and other kinds of social structures built on Web3 platforms can provide that. Companies want to provide verifiable guarantees to their customers, right? And of course, if you have a system which itself is verifiable, that's very good. And of course, resilient infrastructure with 24/7 uptime, right? Things like even Amazon, people who work at Amazon, they probably go on vacation. They like to have Christmas too. Blockchains don't care about that. Blockchains will run all the time, right? Yeah. And I hope users want Web3 too, right? Users hopefully want access to verifiable infrastructure, resilient infrastructure, privacy. They want to be in control of their data. They want global borderless access. They don't want to be censored, right? These are hopefully all things that also users want this as well. Now, the biggest risk, I think, to Web3 adoption is these promises, right? So we promised the idea of self-sovereignty, self-custody, unstoppable apps, uncensorable apps, but maybe not everyone wants this. I think the biggest risk is actually that many people live in this world complacent and dependent on the exact central authorities that we are trying to upend, right? Like you love the fact that when something goes wrong, you can pick up the phone and call someone and they'll just fix it in your background, right? You love the fact when you forget your password, someone will reset it for you. You love the fact that you can just go to a bank or go to some person and they'll just manage your money for you. They'll just handle it, right? We're asking people, well, we know these central authorities, they are abusing their power and they're taking advantage of you without you knowing. We want you to take control of that, but many people probably don't want to. Many people don't feel the pain of the world we live in enough that they would want Web3. And this is, I think if anyone in this room probably has gone to a Christmas dinner or something like that, and they talk to their family, and they're like, well, I don't really understand this thing. It doesn't really make sense to me. Why would I want to own this magical digital money? And you explain to them, oh, well, you can be in control of the money and you can transfer it and all whatever. Well, what happens if I lose it? Well, that sucks, right? Those people, they've never felt the pain of the system that we work in, right? But if you also then go on the internet, if you go to talk to people around you today, maybe everyone has a story about why they couldn't get a bank loan, why they couldn't open an account, why they struggled because they needed to share their identity to someone they didn't want to. These are the systems. So we kind of have to have pain enough to get to the point where Web3 systems actually make sense. But it could be that we never get to that pain. Or it could be, for example, if you're feeling it like I'm feeling it, that the existing central authorities are kind of sneaking their way into our ecosystem and taking ownership of it before we can actually achieve full decentralization. Like, there's kind of this thing where like, oh, we're so excited that Trump, is supporting DeFi. We're so excited that, Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan is like supporting DeFi. Like, this is the wrong way of thinking, man. These guys are exactly the people we're trying to fight, right? And they might be able to take the world that we want from under us and pretend, hey, we're offering you this better world, but it's actually the same fucking thing, right? It's kind of scary. So this is the biggest risk, I think. People will not understand. And this is, by the way, a lot of what I've been focusing on recently is education. I think education is the absolute best way to achieve this. You get people to understand what are the problems, have them learn, right? Maybe they haven't experienced it themselves, but people can understand, through learning what the problems are actually in our world. So if I took a list of the top 40 websites, and I wanted to kind of take an idea of what Web3 might look like in that view, I have like search engine, social networking, and etc. Let's go through that list. All right, first I want to ignore something. So when I go over these different kinds of versions of the Web3 version of these apps, I want to ignore the trivial case. We all know in this room, money, payments, finance, that all works. It's a known situation, right? So we know that basically every app on the internet today can benefit from having easier subscriptions, easier purchases. For example, getting paid per minute instead of getting paid per month, right? Like all these things absolutely work. So let's look beyond this. Let's think about what can we think about beyond this for Web3. How about for online search? Well, a lot of it will be the same. Like, this crawlers, indexing, and ranking, you can't really decentralize that, right? That's more efficient and done better in a kind of a centralized way, right? And of course, we're starting to feel it. There's a shift to AI models. I think we're becoming more and more used to the idea of using AI to understand our search query and actually give us the results we want versus the more traditional search indexing, right? But a Web3 version of online search might include a verifiable search index, right? Something that actually shows us all of the items which are in this search index that we're searching for to make sure that our websites are actually represented there fairly, right? Transparent control of your search results, right? So you might actually have token curated registries or certain DAOs telling you what sites are actually of high influence, are actually of good merit, right? Again, a shift from advertisements to micropayments, right? So instead of having to go to a site and get bombarded with advertisements, you can actually go to sites and pay for using that site, right? I think this is kind of what Brave has been trying to do. They've been trying to turn this, like, hey, I'm on a site for a couple minutes, I'm willing to spend 10 cents to not see a bunch of ads in my face, right? And then again, with the shift to AI, we can actually start to have verifiable training data for the models you use, right? Can I actually know that, again, my sites and the websites I want to see are actually being used to train the AIs that are actually giving me all these results? So again, it's actually not that much different, but there's a sense of verifiability in what Web3 can offer. How about video streaming, right? Things like YouTube, again, most YouTube videos or any kind of streaming video shouldn't be on Web3. It would make no sense to host most videos on a blockchain or on a decentralized computer, right? So most of these are hosted by Web2 servers. But you could imagine inside of the video streaming websites, you have Web3-based accounts. Occasionally, you might host a very important video onto a Web3 platform directly, right? So if this video would be censored, if this video would be banned on certain countries, and you want to make sure to get that information out there, you can actually directly use it. And of course, it'll be much more expensive. But you get properties like censorship resistance and proof of existence. You get proof that this video was uploaded at a certain time with a certain hash, and it hasn't been modified or changed in some way. Things you don't get when you host it on a centralized server, right? You get, again, transparent algorithms, controllable curation, right? Additional revenue sharing via micropayments. So like, as a user using a video streaming service, if I make subtitles or if I, create a high quality comment, I can get paid and supported for that, right? And then, of course, ways for creators and their communities to have more deep connection, right? And that a lot of people in YouTube, they really build these communities. I mean, you're starting to see actually new features in YouTube or in Twitch that try to enable content creators to actually reach out to the community. We can imagine way more powerful systems when we have DAOs, when we have programmable smart contracts, when we have systems that can actually allow them to do this entirely in their own control. Then social media, right? So, of course, the same. Like, I expect to see some dedicated front ends. Uncontroversial content will be hosted on Web 2. But I think for social media, you'll expect to come with your own identity and your own social graph, right? You'll be able to create an identity that you fully own, that's fully sovereign, and the people that you connect with will be also your graph. And you'll be able to bring those people with you across different platforms using the same agnostic protocols, right? So you won't be sad that, oh, I'm going to leave Facebook. I lost all my friends and all my images and all that kind of stuff. You can actually bring it with you as long as we follow these kinds of high-level protocols, right? We can have direct monetization of the creator economy, ability to create communities that wield power and finance. A lot of these ideas are kind of very similar, right? But this is kind of, again, the idea that most of it kind of feels the same, but a huge amount of the control over your identity, over your information, will come with you in Web3. Okay, and then let's go to products. So, one of the things I get asked a lot when I talk about the world computer, and I explain, hey, we're building a new decentralized computer. It does everything you expect a computer to do. And people ask me, questions. Can it run Docker? Can it run Firefox? Can I run Doom? Can I run Photoshop? The answer is yes. That really, the real decentralized world computer should be able to run any kind of application that you already are familiar with, that you already use. But the question is, should you? I don't think most of these apps really make sense in a decentralized context. You have to remember, when you're using a world computer, the properties you get, but also the downsides you have, right? Are you willing to spend all that extra money to run Firefox on a decentralized computer versus your local computer? Are you that worried about whatever's happening here? Probably not, right? One of the mistakes, I think, is the influence of the SDKs we created. So things like Substrate and the parachains idea, it really influenced how people thought about building apps for Web3. The story we're telling everyone is if you want to build an app for the future of Web3, build your own blockchain. But that's not, I think, what most people want. The realization is that many Web3 applications may not want to be a blockchain, right? Instead, they want to just be a regular application that absorbs the properties that Web3 systems provide. And that also, many blockchains today that are using these SDKs aren't actually Web3. Many of them are centralized. Many of them are controlled. Many of them have a very specific foundation or something like, Tether or USDC that exactly control the minting and that can stop payments, that can do all these things against the Web3 ideals, right? So even using these SDKs doesn't actually mean you're Web3, right? And a lot of these L2s that actually, build away from the main chains themselves would actually rather be Web3 applications as well. They want this idea of resilience and decentralization and scalability, but they have frustration accessing the main chain, the main L1, whether it be Ethereum, whatever, because of congestion. And so they go spin out, build their own blockchain, but they would just rather be an app, right? They don't want to actually own a blockchain. They just want to do application things. So let's talk about some of the apps that you can actually build on this computer that don't require you to be your own blockchain. It's funny because this first one actually is the blockchain. So the first app that really actually makes sense on the world computer is actually these distributed ledgers. What's kind of funny is that in retrospect, we kind of told people, okay, if you want to build a ledger, you're going to basically launch your own little computer, right? If we can build the right, proper, decentralized computer, then people can just host their own ledger applications directly on the computer themselves, right? And so rather than building your application-specific blockchain, just build your app, right? Which is using a ledger, which cares about a state, and run it on that computer, right? And again, I really believe this is actually kind of the direction that Polkadot and Kusama will go, that we will build a very powerful general computer far beyond what it means to be Polkadot relay chain today. But the relay chain that we know today for Polkadot and Kusama will run on that computer, right? It will be the ledger application that runs on a bigger computer. But this computer itself will have impact and meaning beyond what we know Polkadot to be today, right? Then, of course, you have all the basic blockchain apps. All these apps that right now today we force you to be a smart contract, or we force you to be your own blockchain. All of these things can just be regular applications. How would you design it if you're building a Web 2 app, but want to have the properties of Web 3? You can do all of those same things. Then you have a new set of applications. These are kind of introduce something new with Jam. So Jam introduces this DA layer, the memory of your computer, and this allows for the creation of ephemeral applications, applications which don't write to the ledger. Again, one of the thought experiments I'll have you have today is, does it really make sense to make a smart contract on Ethereum today which doesn't write to the Ethereum ledger? I don't think it doesn't make sense. And it really, like, you could do a function which just executes some adding function and doesn't write anything, but that's just you're burning money to calculate nothing, right? In fact, there are a new set of applications which you can create using a computer like Jam, which only accesses the memory, the non-permanent state, and never actually touches the actual ledger. So one is like the idea of person-to-person sales. So let's say you and me wanted to purchase a car. One of the ideas we had in the past with Ethereum is, okay, I can make a smart contract. The smart contract can act as an escrow. The escrow will be this independent party which can verify some condition was met, and then when the escrow is complete, then the money gets transferred over, right? But once I made that contract, it will live on Ethereum forever. Forever, ever. I mean, you and me spent a week doing the sale. That contract will be there forever, and it doesn't scale. So imagine you can actually have these kinds of ephemeral transactions happen in a DA layer, and the only thing that actually gets changed on the actual ledger is that my money went to you, or your money went to me, whatever, right? That final state update. You could actually play on-chain video games. So I don't think Doom is a great example, because Doom is an FPS. It's like a single-player game. But what we saw on Twitch was this idea of Twitch plays Pokemon. You have basically a whole set of people asking or typing in the chat like the action they want to take, like move up, move down, press A, press B, whatever. And they were able actually, as a decentralized community, to beat the game Pokemon. I absolutely believe we could do this, right? Now, in this sense, we don't need to store any data on the blockchain. We can just, of course, run the game in the memory, have people submit transactions, influence the outcome, create this DAO for playing Pokemon, and when the game is done, the game is done. It's not actually impacting the scalability of the platform itself, right? This is a very useful form of how you can use memory. And then things like a disappearing global chat, right? Like, right now, if you want to send a message into the world, of course, if you want that message to be permanent, you put it into the ledger. But if you want to just have a decentralized chat where, it's uncensorable, you can talk to anyone in the world, using the memory, using a non-permanent state makes a lot of sense for that, right? And then, of course, kind of the biggest vision I have for the world computer is to create network states, right? So this starts with proof of personhood. A computer can actually be used to start to identify individuals in the real world. Again, in a world right now where AI is taking over and AI is growing, and we have a hard time understanding what is real and what is not real, who is real and who is not real, we will need systems which will actually be able to allow us to identify these things. And something as sensitive as identifying who is a person and not a person, this is the risk of what central authority, this is the risk, or we risk using central authorities for that. We risk central authorities faking people or eliminating people from using these systems, right? A real world computer can allow us to actually create these systems in a way that everyone can verify and trust. Then once you have good proof of personhood, once you have a good idea of who is actually a real human, you can start to create verifiable voting systems, right? You can actually make decisions on-chain which affect the on-chain world and the off-chain world, right? And a computer will be able to allow everyone access to do that and do things in general ways. And then finally, once you have people and voting, you can imagine the beginning of a network state, right? The beginning of the way for us as communities to build systems without physical borders, with shared values, digital coordination, and economic alignment, right? We can create resilient Web3 systems, resilient platforms, all based on this world computer. And this goes back to my beginning, right? The beginning is that we believe that we can want to create a more resilient world, right? That more resilient world needs a resilient computer. And that resilient computer can allow us to create network states. Okay, so I want to end on the future for Polkadot. So, I think Polkadot has always felt different. I think if you were in the Polkadot ecosystem for a while and you looked at all the other blockchains left and right, you just felt like, what, like, are we even in the same world? And I think that it's becoming more and more clear now why that's the case. I think if you understand this dichotomy between the distributed ledger technology and the decentralized computer, you can understand why Polkadot has always and will always feel different than the meme blockchain world that we understand today, right? We are trying to build something quite different, quite unique, and something that is not proven to actually be useful. Something that is not proven that will actually be adopted, but something that we believe the world needs. I think we should start looking at Polkadot as a community, not a product, right? I think we're very limiting ourselves by thinking that Polkadot is just about parachains. I think that this is just a thinking of the past, and that we need to, just like the technology has evolved, evolve our mindset, right? If we are limiting Polkadot as only supporting L2s, as only supporting blockchains and other ledgers, as only supporting people who use our SDKs, this is the wrong way of thinking, right? We should instead use Polkadot and look at Polkadot as a vision for the future, a mission to build that future, and again, as a community of people who can execute that mission, right? We want to make a computer where you can run any kind of application, where any kind of ledger can be hosted on it, right? Where you don't even have to be a ledger, you can just be a regular kind of application, right? Anything you want. This is the original ETH vision, right? And I think Polkadot could be viewed more as a community in this way.
Can I ask a question, Jennifer?
Yeah, please.
The last thing you said.
Let's get a mic real quick.
Polkadot can become a decentralized biggest world computer. But
Yeah.
several slides before you said Polkadot because someone could run on a world computer.
So, and what I clarified, yeah, that's good.
But you also talked about the Polkadot world computer and now.
So I want to clarify here the relay chain. The Polkadot is on a relay chain. So this idea, so the relay chain is very specifically a solution for L2 rollups.
Yeah.
I think L2 rollups are useful because as long as ledgers are useful, having a rollup technology for ledgers will be useful. Building that rollup technology on top of a computer makes a lot of sense versus building, where's that slide? I have a slide here that the first app will be the distributed ledger, right? Building that rollup technology on a computer makes a lot of sense versus building a computer which only can do rollups, right? But I think Polkadot as a technology, or like Polkadot as a community, can be backing more than just rollups, more than just L2s. It can actually be backing this world computer. And that's what we should be aiming towards with our community, right? Okay. Yeah. And then if you believe all that I'm saying, I think Polkadot's mission does not end with blockchain technology, right? I think we can argue that things like Jam are mostly not blockchain anymore, right? There is a piece of it which is blockchain, which is this storage. But you have things like the distributed data lake, this DA layer, which is not blockchain. You have the P2P networking stack, which is not blockchain. You have the PokaVM computation stack, which is not blockchain. As we build more and more components for the decentralized computer, it becomes less and less blockchain technology and more decentralized computer technology, right? So to achieve our vision, we need to keep building different parts of the decentralized computer and eventually scale to the decentralized cloud, right?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So, you said as a community we should realize a vision, like a infrastructure where you build applications on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if we again can focus our vision on building like applications on this new supercomputer, while we haven't proven ourselves to build applications on what we currently have, is that not a counter argument for not focusing on the community? Maybe we have always been focusing on the community, and we should instead focusing on the product. Because I think this also happens with the whole Polkadot.
I think that's a very good fair point. I think what I mean by having us focus on as a community is that I think that Polkadot. So what I mean by product is I don't think we should not improve the product. I just think we shouldn't be attached to the product that we understood before. So if I were to say what is the product of Polkadot today, I think many people would say parachains. And what I think is really important is that I want us to move beyond that product. I think the product that we actually want to achieve is this world computer. And I think that we haven't been able to achieve, for example, people to build great applications in the parachain world because parachains themselves are quite limiting. That the Polkadot protocols are quite limiting. And things like Jam are trying to unlock much more flexibility around how we can actually build apps. And hopefully, again, with things like being able to run basic x86 applications directly on this computer, you don't even have to think about building a blockchain application. You just think about building an application and run it on this computer, right? Now, when I talk about focusing on community, I want to say that we have today a bunch of people in this room who care about this stuff. I don't want us to be attached to this specific product. I want us to be a community that tries to understand this mission and is willing to shift the product and shift the goals and shift the thinking to follow this mission. And I think that if we look at what is Polkadot today, what is Polkadot 10 years from now, what is Polkadot 100 years from now, it won't be one product. It won't be even the Polkadot World Computer. It will be the community that built a computer, that built a relay chain, that built a DAO, that built a treasury. That will be Polkadot. It will be the legacy of things we've created from the community, right? That have been always trying to solve this this Web3 problem. Yeah, okay. So then, yeah, the last point, really as a decentralized community, we need to have a shared vision of the future and realize bigger goals. So that's the hope of this presentation is to kind of share a little bit about at least my vision of the future. And I hope that we as a community can come together and we can understand where we're going towards, and we can be flexible in what we're trying to build, how we build it, and realize that, things and ideas change with technology. I mean, a lot of the slides wouldn't have existed if we hadn't had the latest kind of innovations happening in Jam. And I'm sure there's many more slides that I will create in the future with things that I start to realize, that you start to realize, that we start to create with new technologies. And that's it. Was that too much of a ramble?
Wow.
Okay, good. Great. Any more questions? Any more thoughts? Any comments?
What timeline do you envision for this?
For a world computer?
Yeah.
The timeline for a world computer. Well, we have test nets running, which run things like Doom today. But I mean, practically speaking, I don't think that this will be a useful computer for the average application for 3 to 5 years. I mean, it takes time for this technology to evolve. But one of the things is that we shown that it works. We've shown that it's possible. It's just about a lot of very clever engineering, and solving a lot of problems. Yeah. Yeah. The mic.
Yeah, first a comment. I think, great presentation, but I think we have to be careful with language.
Okay.
Because one huge problem outside there, especially with AI, is trust.
Yeah.
And actually what blockchain and also world computer is doing is enabling more trust. But when you say less trust, more truth,
Yeah.
of course we understand it, but people outside just say less trust. So
I totally agree.
wording is very important, and I think the same goes for applications. So like social media, their network effects, right? It's very hard to break that. And more problem people are aware of are fake information.
Yeah, yeah.
So really explain how the technology can help you.
Yeah.
With simple language.
Yeah, yeah. I think, for that first point, I think that you're absolutely right. I think that we're moving away from this term, and I think that the latest terminology is resilient public digital infrastructure, which, again, is kind of very professional sounding, but at least it describes like, hey, you're using public digital infrastructure, which has properties of resilience. I think that's kind of what we're trying to aim for with this thing. Now, with social media and stuff like that, I absolutely agree as well. I think it may not ever happen that we actually move or use Web3 social media as the primary platform. People need to feel enough pain to actually move over. And we're starting to feel that. Like, I mean, if you look right now, and we're seeing it happen in front of us, right? Like, Twitter was the place, and now we started having Blue Sky, and we started having other alternatives, and not many people, or what's the other one? Come on, someone knows. Yeah, Mastodon, right? Mastodon. Not everyone has moved there, but some people have felt enough pain on Elon Musk's platform that they have moved. And it's just a matter of time for enough people to feel enough pain for this to happen. But who knows? Maybe it's unproven. So who knows if it will actually happen or not? Yeah. But great comments. I agree. Yes.
You mentioned playing a video game or playing, having interaction only on the memory. I'm thinking of the technical constraints that we have right now, only to develop on a layer 2 smart contract Solidity. We are really looking to have a minimum fees, and we are not at such a scale of being able to run a video game, or we will have to imagine a completely new blockchain or way to develop how.
So this is the promise that I want to offer to you, that if we are successful in delivering this decentralized world computer, the game that you build for your local PC should run on this world computer, right? Now, of course, you will get more features and access building a game on the world computer. You will get, for example, access to the world of DeFi. You'll get access to all these decentralized protocols and decentralized systems. Your game could actually mint new decentralized assets, could actually take advantage of people's decentralized identity, right? But practically speaking, in terms of the actual game, it would run. But to be honest, you probably don't want to run most games, the logic on chain. It doesn't make sense. Like I wouldn't want to, like, you know, like the world computer to render the frames or to do ray tracing or whatever, right? You want to find the right mix where can my back-end server or could some part of the game run on the world computer? Can some part of the game run on the main, yeah, on chain exactly, and then some part run locally, right? But the idea is that you really could run anything. I mean, the idea is that you can take any x86, x64, ARM64 application and directly run on this world computer, if you're willing to pay for it.
I had a question about the Polkadot Hub.
Yes.
So what's the timeline of that?
I'm not part of the hub team, but I think we're launching the stuff on Kusama like very, very soon, like within this quarter, like Q3, and then on Polkadot, depending on the like, you know, audits and how that thing goes, soon after that. I would hope by the new year.
And what's the correlation between Asset Hub and Polkadot Hub? Will they be the same?
It is the same. So what was the Asset Hub? So let's say this: there is a blockchain. And what we realized is that the network effects of having all the assets and all of the kinds of people come together in a single shared state is very powerful. One of the problems with Polkadot is you get all of this powerful computation, you get all this execution sharding, but you get fragmentation in the state. And this leads to complexities when trying to build these network effects. What we saw was successful in all these other L1 blockchains is they brought everyone together. They didn't get quite the throughput that we could achieve, but they got all of these network effects of like liquidity and being able to trade things easily, etc. The Asset Hub became the natural spot for us to bring everyone together. The Asset Hub was already a place for assets to come together. Once we added this smart contract layer, we added programmability to it, and we now have a place where everyone can kind of build on that. And what's amazing is we're already starting to see the beginnings of the ledger computer technology. So the Polkadot Hub will be this layer 1 blockchain running on a kind of this execution meta protocol, this layer 0 relay chain, which allows for execution scaling, allows for elastic scaling. So this layer 1 blockchain can use one core or more cores as it has more or less throughput, right? And so you start to see this is going to be a scalable blockchain far beyond any of the L1s we know today. But basically the Asset Hub will turn into this idea of the Polkadot Hub. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation.
Of course.
It was great. I have a question, maybe it's a bit philosophical one.
Great,
So,
I love that.
we have this vision of decentralized world, yeah, where the network is not controlled by anyone, yeah, and in the same time we say that it's for freedom and it's for equal opportunities for people, and then we say like when Trump comes there, when enterprise comes there with all the resources, and they may take it from us. Like how to balance these two things. I think it's a bit, contradictory. We say that it's for everyone, but at the same time we say that you are guys, you are bad, we don't want you here. Who can decide that and how you can find, some equilibrium?
Well, okay, I think that abuse of power is how do you say, like, there's no opinion about it. People have abuse of power. Now, if that abuse of power helps you, that's great. You're like, I support these guys. They're abusing their power to make things I want happen. If you're on the other side, you don't like it. But what we try to do with this platform is to try to eliminate the ability to abuse power, that everyone has an approximate equal amount of power, an equitable amount of access to the internet, right? Now, this isn't going to change factions. Like, I don't think Web3 internet is going to change. In fact, Web3 internet might increase factions. With the ability to create network states and DAOs, you'll be able to create communities online which are much more hive mind, which are much more single-minded, right? Which are much more aligned with a certain set of visions, and you might disagree with them. But what the reality is that when you interact with, let's say I'm in one faction or one party, and I want to interact with someone else in another faction, and we want to do a trade, what's important is that this world computer offers us both equity, it offers us both knowledge that we can verify my interaction with the other party is correct and fair, right? And that kind of thing. Now, one thing I want to, and I'm not sure if you were thinking about this when you made your comment. One thing that I don't like about the internet today, or the Web3 internet today, is that Web3 is all about finance. So if you have more money, you have more power. And existing parties have that. And we're promising this free internet for everyone, but not everyone is as rich as Donald Trump. Not everyone is as powerful as Elon Musk. I think things like proof of personhood will solve some of those problems. So I don't see, for example, a world where someone who is poor will have as much access to the world computer as someone who's rich. It's just impossible, because they have more resources. They can access this computer more. It's impossible to not have that. But what I think with things like proof of personhood, we can guarantee all people, no matter how much income you have, no matter how much wealth you have, no matter what party you have, some amount of access to the world computer, some fair amount of access. And I think that will be a good start to disrupting the ability to begin with to have such a disparity between the rich and the poor. Like the thing that we're seeing over and over is that the top 1% is becoming even more powerful and 99% is being left behind, right? I don't think we can solve that tomorrow, but I think we can create a platform which reduces the impact of that by allowing everyone, all 100%, to access the computer some amount. Does that answer? I mean, or,
That was good.
okay.
Maybe much longer. But
Yeah, we should talk. We can talk. Let's get a beer.
Yeah, well, maybe later.
Yeah.
Like, I want to let people also to ask.
Of course, of course.
Just wanted to say that if you want to give more access to poor people, let them run the nodes and let them get access to resources. I mean, like,
Yeah.
to run the world computer, you need many, many decentralized nodes to
Yeah.
do this computation. So let people do that,
Yeah.
and you may create a more equitable world, because, I mean, $100 somewhere in, I don't know, South Africa is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, who knows?
So I'll say this, for comment on that, Polkadot actually has done a really good job at trying to make sure that our hardware specifications has always been consumer grade. But it's not easy. Like, I mean, we basically need like a $5,000 gaming computer to run a node. The reality is that if we allow everyone to run a node on their phone, the computer will be slow, because it's only as fast as much a phone could process stuff, right? So having literally anyone run a node is tough. But allowing anyone, for example, to participate in the validation process, that is probably possible.
Can you have small nodes and big nodes?
I think this will be, I think what you described are different computers. These are the multiple computers. You might have a world computer which is slower, but is much more, spread out, much more, anyone can, run a thing on it. But then you have a computer like ours, which is much more like, kind of like consumer grade. And then you might have like the Solana levels, right? You have to basically run a $30,000 server that only a few people can access, and it's really, really fast. There will be different kinds of computers, just like we have different computers in our lives, right? I have my laptop, I have my phone, I have my desktop computer. I think there will be different versions of the world computer in that way.
Amazing presentation.
Thank you.
I haven't seen you on stage for a while, and this was perfect.
I'm glad.
Regarding the consensus of any world computer, or specifically Polkadot, are the applications on top, or even DLTs, dependent on each world computer consensus? And if yes or not, how does this impact also governance within DLTs on a world computer?
I think that this idea of the DLTs having their own governance consensus is an artifact of the L2 model. I think if we achieve the true world computer, applications will just think they're running on a computer. They won't even know that underneath this is this blockchain system. It'll just be an app running on a computer. In that context, I do not think these apps will be affected by the consensus. Of course, there will be things underlying, which is like forks and all that kind of stuff. But hopefully that's all handled by the computer, and the app will just have a single canonical state. I think that if apps want to have their own governance or have their own system, they can do that, but that will live at an application level. Just like, I can make an app today about voting on the color of a website, whatever. You can do the same thing for your app. But I think, for example, there won't be an intermingling or a need for intermingling between your application and the low-level governance and consensus of the computer itself. Again, the idea really should be, let's go back to this picture. I mean, I don't know how much we'll be able to achieve this, right? Yeah. But the real goal should be, I build an app, it runs on a computer, and I don't know that computer is actually a blockchain underneath. And that would be the goal.
And we said Kusama Polkadot relay chain can run on the world computer, right?
Yeah, it will be an app.
So then the relay chain would not have its consensus. It would have the consensus of Polkadot world computer.
It would. Well, that's a good thing. The Polkadot would have its own layer of validation. So Polkadot's the relay chain's job is to validate a bunch of PVFs of the other parachains, right? So it doing that validation process will be the application that it's running on that computer, right? But in terms of like the underlying world computer, it will have its own finality, its own process for it receiving the join and accumulate parts of that process. That make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So it actually it will change a lot of the DLT.
I think so.
Consensus. It will move it a layer lower,
Yeah.
which impacts governance as well.
Yeah. I think so, but at this point, honestly, I'm talking a little bit out of my pay grade.
It will take time.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
So with building applications on this world computer, like in the short term, should we focus on building services, like very short term services, or building applications already on the existing services that we allow with the new world computer?
Okay, I think that today there's two main focuses. One will be building services directly on Jam. So I think there is some example services already. And so if you're kind of at the more lower level of the building stuff, like if you want to build your own operating system, you would be building services on top of Jam directly. Again, Jam is a kernel. You can build basically little operating systems on top of it. If you're more of the application person, you should be looking into Core VM. Core VM is like our own service or kind of operating system which can run general applications, and you should be looking how you can build apps targeting Core VM and also how you can build drivers that work on Core VM for your app. That being said, those things are all like super new. Like the only people who are building services and building stuff for Core VM are people in Parity Technologies. So, but this is the kind of direction I would look into. And how exactly, that translates to what people will be actually doing in the future, I don't know. I don't see right now, today, a similar substrate SDK as we have now for blockchains as we do for Jam. But something like that will have to exist eventually, right?
Yeah, but so if you would focus your hackathons, your tooling, all your development in the short term, would you focus it on building services on Jam, or would you focus it on building applications on the new services like Core VM that are already being built for Jam?
I think it depends on what you have a comment on that? Or, yeah, let Basti say.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't focus on that right now. It's like, I mean, it's, as Shawn said, it's a little bit like in the future, and I maybe guess would disagree with me, but I mean, it's quite complicated, and for sure, some people need to do it. Some people need to think around, play around with it, but it's not like it's, right now it's like, it's still like, there's no test net.
Yeah.
So it's quite complicated. For sure, you can play around and get some understanding of it, but I'm not sure I would make a hackathon out of it. More like the short term is, for example, for the Polkadot community, it's more like focus on the Polkadot products.
There's end November. There's a conference in Buenos Aires where they want to do the first Jam hackathon, and end of this year, December, they want to do a Jam PBA. So both of these things already need that question answered in a way.
I mean, I don't know what the Jam PBA will be about, but it will be about teaching how Jam is working. So like you could implement your own Jam node, for example, which is kind of helping to spread the knowledge so that more people know how to fix the network and all these things. So not only some people know.
I think the biggest exposure you can get to the future of this world computer is the fact that we use PokeVM in our new Polkadot Hub as a contract platform. It is the same CPU being used in this world computer.
It's not that I'm not hinting at the exposure, but I'm trying to think what the best strategy is for the community in terms of Jam in the early stage, where we want to get builders to build with it.
I think build contracts for the Polkadot Hub using PokeVM, and you will already get exposure to the CPU inside of Jam. And I think that there will be a lot of overlap of understanding what the PokeVM provides that you'll get when you start to build in Jam.
I think that's what he said before, with the smart contracts, you're used to I need to optimize everything to the ground and everything, I cannot raise any resources, and we need to get rid of it, because I mean, it's, maybe in some senses maybe not, because you're using less resources, but it also prevents a lot of people starting to use it. So maybe what he said, with Poker VM, if you get more access to more resources on Polkadot Hub, with a smart contract, you can already build stuff that maybe right now cannot build. Yeah. And that enables. And I think it's also that's the general idea. This question of let's actually say you will be able to run everything. So we will need to think about what do we actually want to have to be verified on the computer.
Yeah.
Also get more. And I think right now the problem is actually for the anti-listening, we are 24,000 people or whatever worldwide. That's less than 1% of the total population of developers. And So I think that's a grand goal where we need to go. We need to make it easier. So you need to take a script kiddie, anyone, put them, and they should be able to build something. They at least play around.
Yeah.
So these people, by playing around, they will develop and they will bring up new ideas.
Yeah. Anyway.
No. Right now, so right now not. I like you use this SDK as the public. I think you can get like a build binary from the Poker Jam implementation. But like all the other, like like from the node or from what do you like?
For the new world computer.
Yeah, they're public. Yeah.
No.
The
Maybe
teams,
so.
Teams are competing secretly.
Yeah, so like
really?
yeah, so like I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So the point is like yeah, right. Okay, we can also.
Yeah, let's
questions. We're open for it.
yeah, let's get drinks. It's like warm up here, right? Let's get some drinks and let's talk more, huh?
This is a topic for drinks, but like if you have other questions arising,
Yeah.
we can go.
Yeah. Okay.